The Killer is David Fincher's most recent movie, and after watching it a second time, the opening 20 minutes was something which really stood out to me for a number of different reasons. It established the main character, allowed us to understand who he was and the type of individual that he was in a way that was different to most other movies. But most importantly, I drew stark similarities between the way that the movie Fight Club was set up and how we came to understand Edward Norton's character. So with that, I thought I'd break down and explain the opening section, discuss why it was successful, powerful, and how it copied Fight Club in order to do that. So let's get into it. Here is how the Killer copied Fight Club in its opening scene and why it worked. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. The inner monologue and lack of outwards dialogue. What the opening section of this movie really focuses on is the inner dialogue and internal thoughts that the killer was having as he was planning on taking out the targets in the opposite building. Everything that we learned about the character in the opening 20 minutes came from him talking to himself inside of his head and only uttering 12 words out loud. 11 when he was on the phone to Hodges, and 1 where he acknowledged the mistake that he made when he shot the innocent bystander instead of the target. This inner dialogue allowed us to learn more about the character than what we would have done if he was barely speaking in this scene, or if he was communicating with other people. We were witnessing the most intimate conversation that one could possibly have, and it was one with their own inner thoughts. This is something that is extremely similar to what occurs in the movie Fight Club. Edward Norton is billed as the narrator in the movie, and that is exactly what the killer acts as for the most part, but most specifically in this opening scene. Within Fight Club, it takes all but a couple of moments for us to hear inside of Norton's head as he's narrating what we're watching unfold on screen. However, it's not exclusively inside of his head. It's one that drifts between hearing his thoughts and also him conversing in the real world to other characters. Just like what the killer did. This was done for the exact same reason as to why we saw it in the opening part of The Killer. In a movie where we're picking up with a character that's partway through their journey, for example, in The Killer, we're witnessing him at the top of his game and at the point where he'd never made a mistake before. And in Fight Club, we were seeing him struggling with life in general and living a generally unhappy life. By being able to have their inner thoughts narrated to us, it almost provides a fast track into how and what they truly feel, and why they are the way that they are. We witness the most personal conversation, and that's often the best way to learn the most about a character, because there's no lying or deceit, because it's to oneself. This mirrored style and the fact that Fincher thought it was appropriate to replicate what was done 25 years prior is something that I feel was a good decision to make, because it truly did allow us to learn more about the killer just as it did Norton's character in Fight Club. And it meant that we could understand the emotions that one was feeling, even though from the outside they were as cold as stone and expressing nothing. It was a great technique to transfer over. The switching between perspectives. In terms of another reason as to why this opening scene worked so well was that it had small intricate details such as the switching of perspectives with the different shots that we had on camera and the audible differences that we would experience. For example, for a lot of it, we were hearing what was inside of his mind and he was narrating over the top, but there were other moments where it would deliberately switch from hearing exactly what he was hearing in reality, and also what one would hear on the outside. For example, we would hear all of the ambient and miscellaneous sounds that were occurring in the room and the environment, such as the birds cooing, the tap dripping, and the constant buzzing from the heater. But there were many other moments, such as when he would play his music from his MP3 player, and the sound would then alter from us hearing the music at a loud volume as we'd get the perspective from his earphone, and in turn we'd hear it in the ear that his earphone was in. Then it would cut to a shot further in front of him where we'd hear it muffled and quieter, just like how one would if they were in the room with him. This was something which I think also contributed to the understanding of the character more, and truly working out how he worked in the environment that he was in. Being able to switch from being inside of his head and hearing what he was hearing, and also just being a mere observer, it meant that we had two different perspectives when going on the journey with the character. The same can also be said when he was escaping on the motorbike. We'd hear his muffled, panicked breathing as if we were inside of the helmet with him, something which I thought was an interesting touch. Fincher really wanted us to be the killer as well as witness the journey of the killer. And this was all laid down in the opening section where it alternated several times. This meant that it didn't feel alien and like a disruptive experience throughout the rest of the movie when it continued. The importance of the 12 words. One major takeaway that I got from this opening section was the importance of the only words that Michael Fassbender's killer said when he was projecting outwards. The first batch of words that he said was when he was on the phone to Hodges, and he uttered, "It's been 5 days, I'll give it today and tomorrow." This was something that tied into the fact that he was growing tired and bored of what he was doing. The fact that he was only willing to wait a short while longer showed that he'd reached the end of his tether with it all. We heard him thinking about how he hadn't done a creative kill in a long while, and that the kills from afar was something that he was growing tired of, hence the frustration that he had when he was projecting outwards on the phone. Then, the final word that we heard him say in the opening 20 minutes was "fuck," as he fired the weapon and it misfired. A word which had such importance because this was the moment where the rest of the movie began, and everything that we'd heard him saying in his mind for the previous 19 minutes was made redundant. This calm, cool, collected individual who was at the top of his game dropped straight to the bottom, and everything that he stood for and believed in started to unwind. The mantra and saying that he had, which he lived by when he worked, was broken, and from that moment on, in every chapter following it, he broke a piece one by one. The change in pace. Another thing that this movie did, which was similar to Fight Club, was that it had a rapid change in pace in the flick of a switch. Fight Club starts with the climax of the movie, and then it shifts us immediately back into the past where we learned about how the character met Tyler and how he ended up in the situation that we saw at the end. It went from a tense moment to a moment where we took a backseat with peaks throughout the first 20 minutes. The killer did something which was relatively similar. It started extremely slow, tranquil, and in a way that made us believe that there was nothing which was going to go wrong. With the sleeping, seated nature and the drive to get a heart rate below 65 BPM, it reflected the calm, slow rhythm of the opening section. However, the moment that the weapon was fired and it went wrong, we saw that the music changed and the pace increased rapidly. And the events that we saw unfold in the rest of the episode was a direct result of what we saw in that brief moment, changing the pace of the movie for good. The internal dialogue which was present in The Killer is something which is definitely drawn from Fincher's other work, and I think in this instance it was something that definitely did succeed. The change in pace, the switching of perspectives, and really being able to get inside of the character's mind. It meant that we understood the character in a way that added an additional layer to the movie. Whilst The Killer didn't copy Fight Club in its entirety, it mirrored the formula as a way of showing us the main character in a more personal, intimate way. So, there you have it, how The Killer copied Fight Club in its opening scene, and why it worked. If you want to see more videos such as endings explained, theories and predictions, and character breakdowns, then click on the I button, or alternatively you can head over to my channel where you'll find them all. If you'd like to give me a show or movie that you'd like me to review, then head over to my Twitter, @brainpilot_, and tweet me what show or movie you'd like me to review next. And finally, if you'd like to see what I rate the latest movies that don't quite make the cut to getting a dedicated video, then head over to my Letterboxd profile. It's where I rate the latest releases in real time. What did you think of The Killer? Leave a comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.